And now I would like to invite Mrs. Jessica Faleiro from ActionAid International. She is a research and communication advisor on resilience, and she will be followed by the representative of Spain.
Thank
Please,
you very
Ms.
much.
Faleiro.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, since world nations have adopted the Hyogo Framework for Action in 2005 and the Cancun Adaptation Framework in 2010, there has been increased attention by the international community to resilience-building initiatives. These have helped enable communities and countries to be prepared when shocks and stresses, both natural and climate change-induced, strike, and to emerge out of such crises with minimum human, economic, and social costs. However, such resilience-building strategies become comprehensive only when efforts to tackle conflict-related risks and extensive risks and to achieve long-term adaptation are also integrated into the framework. Underreported and uncompensated small-scale recurrent disasters are increasing rapidly in developing countries. Global factors such as financial crisis, concentration of land, degradation of natural resources, coupled with a poor governance and policy environment, further exacerbate the vulnerabilities of poor and excluded people. Additionally, both the UNISDR's Global Assessment Report and the Global Network for Disaster Reduction's Views from the Frontline report have identified that the least progress countries have made is in achieving the Hyogo Framework's fourth priority for action in tackling the underlying causes of risk. ActionAid works on tackling the underlying causes of risk using a human rights-based approach to resilience. We believe that the indignity of poverty is a violation of human rights, arising from unequal and unjust power relations from the household to the global level. Poverty is not just about a lack of income or a lack of material resources. It is about a lack of power to access, acquire, use, or control the resource, skills, and knowledge that people need to live a life of dignity. People living in poverty, especially women, have limited resources and capacities to deal with and recover from the impacts of shocks and stresses, keeping them in a vicious cycle of poverty and making them even more vulnerable. Our human rights-based approach centers on poor and excluded people to ensure that they have assets and a secured access to natural resources, have skills, access to basic services, and economic opportunities. This is achieved through strengthening active agency, that is, supporting people living in poverty to become conscious of their rights, organize and claim their rights, and hold duty bearers to account. Our human rights-based approach builds on international human rights law, but goes beyond a legal or technical approach to rights. We support people to analyze and confront power imbalances, and we take sides with people living in poverty, challenging abuses of power at the local, national, or international level. ActionAid firmly believes that the human rights-based approach to resilience provides sustainable long-term solutions for people and communities who are the most vulnerable and whose lives and livelihoods are under the constant threat of destruction. We call on UNISDR, national governments, multilateral agencies, local authorities, and civil society networks to ensure that the post-2015 DRR framework does the following. Firstly, takes a human rights-based approach with clear roles, responsibilities, and entitlements of all stakeholders at the core of the framework. This approach puts the relationships between rights holders and primary duty bearers at the center of the process, and provides a basis for the accountability and responsibilities of governments for the safety and protection of rights holders. Grounding the post-2015 framework in human rights standards and associated legislative frameworks reinforces accountability by stressing that commitments for safety and protection are legal obligations. Secondly, tackles the underlying drivers of vulnerability and exposure. The success of a post-Hyogo framework in reducing disaster impacts will depend on its effectiveness in tackling the causes of vulnerability and exposure, something that the Hyogo Framework for Action 2005 to 2015 was unable to do. It has to support a lasting change process to address the structural power imbalances between the rich and the poor and excluded, and among different social and demographic groups that underpin differential vulnerabilities within communities. This requires embedding risk reduction and resilience principles and systems into social, economic, and environmental policies and practices to ensure that they don't create or enhance exposure and vulnerability. This will also require the full integration of disaster risk reduction within development, humanitarian, and environmental frameworks, including the successor Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals, and climate change protocols and agreements. Thirdly, strengthens the local risk governance. The post-2015 DRR framework needs to prioritize strengthening capacities of local government, ensuring that it works collaboratively and in partnership with civil society, the private sector, and at-risk communities. Effective local risk governance requires investments in strengthening local risk governance capabilities and civil society networks, including enhanced human and institutional capacities, political authority, financial resources, accountability, and partnerships. Additionally, we need a framework that has clear targets, milestones, baselines, and indicators, as well as impartial monitoring processes that strengthen accountability and transparency at a local, national, and international level. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Faleiro, for your statement and your contribution.